Governing the Party, How the CPC Works, compiled by Chuntao. Chapter 2. From Revolution to Governing a Country. As China's War of Liberation was drawing to an end in 1949, and the People's Republic of China, PRC, was to be founded, the tasks that the party was facing had changed significantly. At this historical juncture, Mao Zedong, with the far-sighted strategic vision of a great man, put forward the requirement in his report to the second plenary session of the 7th CPC Central Committee that the comrades must be taught to remain modest, prudent, and free from arrogance and rashness in their style of work, and the comrades must be taught to preserve the style of plain living and hard struggle. He sounded the alarm for the whole party that would soon take up the reins of government. After the PRC was founded on October 1st, 1949, the CPC, never slackening in the building of the party while leading the people of the country in developing the economy, had soon won people's support nationwide and become the leadership corps of the country. The CPC had accumulated valuable experience in exploring party building. However, affected by the left deviationist mistakes, especially the Cultural Revolution, the CPC had also made serious mistakes in party building. Both experience and lessons are the precious spiritual wealth of the party in its transformation from revolution to governing the country, which will inspire the party to advance to outstanding achievements. Go to the capital for examination. Shibaipo is a small village in Pingshan County, Hebei Province, North China. It is ordinary in natural conditions, but it is not ordinary for the Chinese Revolution. From March 5th to March 13th, 1949, on the eve of the victory of Chinese Revolution, the CPC convened its second plenary session of the 7th Central Committee. This was the first plenary session of the CPC Central Committee after the victory of the War of Resistance against Japan, and the only session of the CPC Central Committee during the War of Liberation. The second plenary session of the 7th CPC Central Committee began on March 5th in Shibaipo, with 34 members and 19 alternate members of the Central Committee, and 11 other party members attending the session. Members of the Presidium included Mao Zedong, Zhou Enlai, Liu Shaoqi, Jude, and Ren Bishi, and the session was chaired by Mao Zedong. At the session, Mao Zedong delivered a very important report. He said, "Very soon we shall be victorious throughout the country. This victory will breach the eastern front of imperialism and will have great international significance. To win this victory will not require much more time and effort, but to consolidate it will." Pointing out the significance of the victory of Chinese Revolution, he also warned the whole party against the mood of arrogance, the airs of a self-styled hero, inertia and unwillingness to make progress, love of pleasure and distaste for continued hard living, and against sugar-coated bullets. To win countrywide victory is only the first step in a long march of 10,000 li, he said. The road after the revolution will be longer, so. The comrades must be taught to remain modest, prudent, and free from arrogance and rashness in their style of work. The comrades must be taught to preserve the style of plain living and hard struggle. Upon the suggestion of Mao, the session decided to prohibit celebrating the birthdays of the party's leaders and naming any place after them. Days after the session, Mao Zedong and the other CPC leaders left Shibaipo on March 23rd for Peiping, or today's Beijing. During preparatory work, Mao Zedong said, "Comrades, we will go to Peiping soon, but we must not be like Li Zicheng, who changed after they conquered Peiping. The purpose for our communist march to Peiping is to continue the revolution and build socialism until we realize communism." Footnote: Li Zicheng, 1606 to 1645, was born in Miji, Shanxi. He was the leader of a peasant revolt in the last years of the Ming dynasty. Once conquering Beijing in 1644, his troops were soon defeated by Wu Songui and Qing dynasty troops and retreated from the capital. End of footnote. On the eve of starting for Peiping, Mao told Zhou Enlai excitedly that this was like going to the capital for an examination. Zhou replied, "We must pass the examination and will not withdraw." Mao said, "Withdrawal would mean failure, and we would never be Li Zicheng, but hope to achieve success." This dialogue is famous in the history of the CPC and the PRC. Since then, going to the capital for an examination has become a topic of special significance and far-reaching influence. As a revolutionary leader, Mao Zedong had, with extraordinary insight and strategic vision, fully foreseen that at the critical historical juncture for the victory of the revolution, the CPC would assume very heavy tasks and face very severe challenges. After the foundation of the PRC, the CPC would lead the people for overall socialist construction. The most important task for the party and the country was to heal war wounds and carry out economic, political, and cultural development. During the century since the First Opium War in 1840, China had suffered unending wars, with the country and economy seriously damaged. The country was full of problems. The people lived in destitution, and all the things were waiting to be done. For governing the country and leading economic development, the CPC still had much to learn. Prophets from imperialist powers also asserted that the CPC was unable to solve economic difficulties in China, and the Chinese people still needed to beg from them for a living. Mao Zedong described such difficulties and challenges as the first step in a long march of 10,000 li. Whether the 28-year-old CPC could restore and develop production soon, and whether it could realize the transition from a new democratic revolution to a socialist revolution hence, became important criteria for testing whether the CPC was mature during great historical transformation. Therefore, he compared the march to Peiping as going to the capital for an examination. The year 1644 saw the downfall of two dynasties in China: the Ming dynasty, 1368 to 1644, lasting more than 200 years, and the Shun dynasty, led by Li Zicheng. The downfall of the Ming dynasty was a sure event of history, but the Shun dynasty was defeated soon after achieving an overall victory. Such a history was a warning that should never be neglected by the CPC, which would soon assume the reins of government. In 1644, Li Zicheng's troops conquered Beijing, overthrowing the Ming dynasty. However, Li, after becoming emperor of the Shun dynasty, was carried away by success. His subordinates were either scrambling for power and profits or unscrupulous in robbing fortunes, raping women, and indulging in sensual pleasure. Such circumstances only lasted a month, and Li was expelled from Beijing by Qing dynasty, 1644 to 1911, troops only 18 days after he became emperor of the Shun dynasty. After that, he never had the opportunity to turn the tide. Mao Zedong would never neglect this historical lesson of seizing power for 18 years, but losing power in 18 days. On March 19, 1944, Guo Moruo published in Xinhua Daily an article on the lessons of the failure of Li Zicheng. Footnote: Guo Moruo, 1892 to 1978, born in Leshan, Sichuan, was once head of the Cultural Committee of the Political Work Department of the Kuomintang, KMT government. The department was led by Zhou Enlai, and Guo once organized progressive personages in the KMT-controlled areas for anti-Japanese cultural work. End of footnote. Analyzing the corrupt rule of the Ming dynasty and the whole process of the peasant revolt led by Li Zicheng, Guo revealed the historical inevitability for the downfall of the Ming dynasty and summarized the reasons for Li's failure. Achieving too big a success within too short a time made Li and his subordinates become carried away by their success. Li had made serious mistakes in strategy, organization, and living style, finally leading to a huge historical tragedy. Guo concluded in his article that after 300 years, the regret had faded, but it was time to summarize the experience and lessons from 300 years before. This article received great attention from the CPC Central Committee, especially Mao Zedong, who issued instructions several times to draw up lessons from Li's failure. In his report, "Our Study and the Current Situation," he said, "There have been several occasions in the history of our party when great conceit manifested itself, and we suffered in consequence. Comrades throughout the party should take warning from these instances of pride and error. Recently, we have reprinted Guo Moruo's essay on Li Zicheng, so that comrades may also take warning from this story and not repeat the error of becoming conceited at the moment of success." Based on the analysis of Li Zicheng's lessons, Mao Zedong put forward the famous requirement at the second plenary session of the 7th CPC Central Committee that the comrades must be taught to remain modest, prudent, and free from arrogance and rashness in their style of work, and the comrades must be taught to preserve the style of plain living and hard struggle. Since the CPC would soon achieve the victory nationwide and go to Beijing, Mao Zedong recalled the historical lessons of Li Zicheng. Taking history as a mirror, one can understand the rise and fall of a nation. Mao Zedong regarded going to Beijing as taking an examination, indicating that this was of vital importance to the party. For a person, going to the capital for an examination is a big event, and the result may decide his destiny. For the CPC, going to the capital for an examination would decide the destiny of the party and country. If passing the examination, the CPC would win people's support nationwide, proving that the CPC is the true leader of China. If it failed, the CPC would repeat the failure of Li Zicheng 300 years before. Leadership core of the country. The PRC was founded on October 1, 1949, marking the victory of the new democratic revolution led by the CPC and the end to the history when Chinese people were enslaved and oppressed. Chinese history has entered a new chapter since then. As the PRC was founded, the position of the CPC, which led and organized the revolution, also changed, from a party governing the revolutionary bases and liberated areas to a party wielding power over the whole country. It assumed the responsibility of leading the people of the whole country to build a new country and new society, and the party's history also entered a new chapter. After the PRC was founded, the party's organizations rapidly enlarged. In 1949 alone, 1.4 million members joined the party. However, good and bad members mixed in inevitably following the expansion of party organizations. In wartime, party members were faced with dangers of being arrested or losing their lives at any time. After the victory of revolution, some political speculators wormed their way into the party for Farmian gain. Warnings by Mao Zedong at the second plenary session of the 7th CPC Central Committee were still ringing, and corruption cases had emerged in some places. In January 1950, serious embezzlement, waste, and smuggling were found in the stations along the Beijing-Suyuan railways. The Tianjin Railway Bureau investigated the case of collective embezzlement and fraud led by Xiao Yingyi. On February 21st, the Wuhan branch of the state-run Huazhong department store investigated a serious case of embezzlement, with principals Xu Jinping and Zhen Peilin being sentenced to death. All these showed that after the CPC had become a party in power, its good conduct established and maintained in the revolutionary years was facing grave challenges after victory. in a telegram to Rao Shushi, Deng Zihui, Deng Xiaoping, and Peng Dehuai on April 28, 1950. Mao Zedong said people from various walks of life were unsatisfied with the bad peremptory working style of some officials, especially in the work of collecting grain, taxes, and fees. If such style of work was not corrected, the party would alienate itself from the people. After that, on May 1, 1950, the CPC Central Committee issued a directive to launch a movement throughout the party and army to rectify the party's style of work. In June, the third plenary session of the 7th CPC Central Committee laid out detailed plans for the rectification movement, and Mao delivered a written report. In his report, Mao made clear the time, ways, and purpose of the rectification movement. Time: summer, fall, and winter of 1950. Ways: reading selected documents, summing up work, analyzing the situation, and making criticism and self-criticism. Purpose: to raise the ideological and political level of cadres and rank-and-file party members, correct mistakes in work, overcome the conceit and complacency of the self-styled distinguished veterans, eliminate bureaucracy and commandism, and improve the relations between the party and the people. The ultimate goal was to build the party into a leadership corps for people nationwide after seizing state power. After the rectification movement started, various localities organized rectification work in accordance with the plans and requirements of the CPC Central Committee. To better implement rectification, the CPC General Committee also required heads of party committees above provincial level to analyze main shortcomings of staff members at or below their levels in the style of work, and publish typical cases for self-examination of party members in their respective regions. Lasting not long, this rectification movement still achieved good results. The conceit and complacency of the self-styled distinguished veterans, bureaucracy and commandism within the party were overcome to some extent. The ideological and political level of party members and officials was raised, and relations between the party and the people were improved. But this movement only solved the problem in the style of work among officials, for it didn't last long, leaving other problems such as impurity in organization and ideology unsolved. In his report to the First National Organizational Work Conference, held in March 1951, Liu Shaoqi elaborated on problems in party organizations. For instance, some party members thought the victory of the Chinese Revolution meant completion of the revolution, so they didn't prepare to continue working for the revolution and refused the arduous tasks assigned by party organizations. In their mind, their future task was to develop their own business and enjoy the fruits of the victory of the revolution. For these party members, if the party didn't make them commit to continue the revolution and educate them again for revolution, they would be disqualified as party members. To address these problems in party organizations, the CPC Central Committee regarded it necessary to carry out a large-scale consolidation movement in a planned and prepared way with uniform leadership. As of May 1951, the first party consolidation movement after the foundation of the PRC started throughout the party, step by step, in a well-planned way. During the process of party consolidation, the three antis, a movement against corruption, waste, and bureaucracy, was carried out in the whole country. In order to support the war, to resist U.S. aggression and aid Korea, strengthen the national defense, and prepare for the large-scale economic construction to be started from 1953, the enlarged meeting of the Political Bureau of the CPC Central Committee decided in October 1951 to start a nationwide movement for better troops and simpler administration and to increase production and practice economy. With the movement to increase production and practice economy, good results were achieved in saving production costs, improving farming technologies, and promoting the use of advanced experience. However, During the process of the movement, astonishing problems of waste, embezzlement, and bureaucracy were also discovered all over the country. The Three Antis movement was launched because of astonishing problems of waste, embezzlement, and bureaucracy revealed during the movement of increasing production and practicing economy. At that time, waste, embezzlement, and bureaucracy had become the most serious problems undermining party conduct. Some cases revealed in various places were very alarming. For example, Chen Xianfan, a division chief of the East China Textile Management Bureau, abused power for personal gain, causing losses of 5 billion yuan in old currency, or 500,000 yuan in the new currency of renminbi, to the country. Serious embezzlement was found in some government departments and state-run enterprises in Shenyang, Liaoning Province, where 4 enterprises alone had suffered losses of 4 billion yuan in old currency, or 400,000 yuan in new currency of renminbi. Against such circumstances, especially after the Three Antis movement started across the country, the CPC Central Committee issued in February 1952 a directive on combining the Three Antis movement with the party consolidation movement. Then the embezzlement case of Liu Qingshan and Zhang Zishan, shaking up the entire country, was investigated. Liu Qingshan was former secretary of Tianjin and deputy secretary of Shijiazhuang. Zhang Zishan was former deputy secretary of Tianjin and commissioner in Tianjin Prefecture. They had joined the CPC in 1931 and 1933, respectively. They had both made outstanding contributions to the liberation cause of the party and had risked their own lives. They were heroes in front of the enemies, but they failed to withstand the trial of victory and running the government, becoming arrogant because of their achievements, seeking a life of pleasure and being corrupt. Using their authority, they embezzled public funds from airport construction projects and river regulation, relief loans in water disaster areas, and money from local food programs, food relief to the families of cadres. The amount of embezzlement totaled 17.1 billion yuan in old currency. Embezzlement and waste were not accidental, but closely linked with bureaucracy in the party and government organizations at various levels. In the report submitted to the CPC Central Committee, the Hebei Provincial Party Committee said that after the victory of the revolution, Liu and Zhang failed to withstand the trial in a peaceful environment and resist the corrosive influence of decadent ideology, which led to their violation of state laws and party discipline and lost the fine qualities of party members. They should be responsible for their crimes, but the Hebei Provincial Party Committee, because of bureaucracy in its leadership, also failed to discover and investigate their crimes in time, causing serious losses to state assets and the party's reputation. The committee pledged to review and overcome bureaucracy in its future work and petitioned for punishment. On November 29, 1951, when Zhang was arrested, the North China Bureau of the CPC submitted, after discussion, the report to the CPC Central Committee and Mao Zedong, who commented on November 30th that both Liu and Zhang were serious embezzlers, and the decision of the North China Bureau was correct. This event sounded an alarm to party committees at central and provincial levels that they must pay close attention to discover, investigate, and punish corruption among party officials and to regard it as a very important battle. On December 14th, the Hebei Provincial Party Committee submitted suggestions to the North China Bureau on the punishment of Liu and Zhang. Death. On December 20th, the North China Bureau submitted a report to the CPC Central Committee, suggesting the death penalty or the death penalty with a 2-year reprieve. The suggestion of a 2-year probation was to leave some space to the CPC Central Committee for possible changes. Mao Zedong pondered for a long time when Zhou Enlai brought these reports to him and then gave his opinion. Death. He also prohibited anyone from speaking for them. Party officials in Hebei and Tianjin were shocked by the news that Liu and Zhang would be sentenced to death. Some of their subordinates in the revolutionary time appealed not to sentence them to death because they had rendered outstanding contributions to the revolution. These appeals were all reported to Huang Jing, party secretary of Tianjin. Before the execution of Liu and Zhang, Huang, a longtime leader of them, went to the secretary of the North China Bureau, Bo Yibo. He entreated Bo to report to Chairman Mao and try to change the decision of the death penalty. Bo had to convey these opinions to Mao Zedong. Mao replied that just because they had made outstanding contributions and were in high positions, they must be put to death. Only by doing so could the party rescue more officials from making various mistakes. He also refused to meet anyone else speaking for Liu and Zhang. The Three Antis movement, ending in October 1952, was the first battle adopted by the CPC to remain honest and fight against corruption after it assumed state power. This movement proved that the CPC was fully capable of eliminating corruption, waste, and bureaucracy, and resisting corrosion of the outlook of the exploiting class, so as to establish a new trend. This also helped the party withstand the trial of victory and governing the country, guaranteeing the work of the party and the country. The party consolidation movement ended in 1954. It was a good exploration and practice for the CPC to build a party in power, successfully consolidating the party. Through this movement, the CPC had strengthened the building of ideology, organizations, and party conduct, and improved its connection with the people under new circumstances. The party gained more support from people of various classes for its policies, and the party's prestige among the people was significantly improved. The CPC had become the real leadership core of the country. First exploration to build a party in power. In 1953, China entered a transition period of large-scale economic construction and socialist transformation in an all-round way. But during this period, a divisive incident originating with Gao Gang and Rao Shushi occurred in the party. The CPC Central Committee led the whole party to fight against such activities of damaging unity of the party, and it carried of maintaining and strengthening unity among out an education campaign of party members, especially senior officials. In mid-June 1953, the National Financial Work Conference, after conveying Mao Zedong's speech on the general line in the period of transition, criticized the new tax regime that violated the decision of the second plenary session of the 7th CPC Central Committee to restrict a private capitalist economy. To reach a common understanding among party members, especially senior officials, on the general line in the period of transition, Mao issued an instruction to hold an enlarged meeting of the Financial Conference Leading Group and ordered Bo Yibo, who was responsible for the problems in revising the tax regime, to make a self-criticism at the meeting. Gao Gang, the then member of the Political Bureau of the CPC Central Committee and chairman of the State Planning Commission, elevated Bo's mistake to a struggle between two lines by utilizing the criticism on the financial work, hinting at his attack against Liu Shaoqi and Zhou Enlai. After the National Financial Work Conference, Gao went to East China and Central South China to foment dissension among senior officials and form ties with officials in the army. While Gao was ganging up to oppose Liu Shaoqi and Zhou Enlai, Rao Shushi, the then member of the CPC Central Committee and head of the organization department of the CPC Central Committee, attacked the deputy head of the department, and Ziwen, with the aim of attacking Liu Shaoqi, who was in charge of the party's organizational work. The intrigue of Gao and Rao was actually aimed at sowing discord among central leaders by exaggerating different views within the party and elevating individual and minor mistakes and shortcomings to systemic and serious ones, stirring up division within the party. In the second half of 1953, Mao proposed to retire to a secondary line post, and then the CPC Central Committee also considered establishing the new posts of vice chairman or general secretary. Gao then intensified non-organizational activities, trying to persuade Chen Yun and Deng Xiaoping to remove Liu Shaoqi from his post. Chen and Deng refused Gao and reported his activities to Mao, arousing vigilance from the top leader. On December 24th, Mao Zedong chaired a meeting of the Political Bureau of the CPC Central Committee, warning against the divisive activities of Gao and Rao. Because of the Gao Gong and Rao Shushi incident, and the fact that some senior party officials were not fully aware of the significance of unity and increasing the prestige of the Central Committee, especially the mood of arrogance after the victory of the revolution, Mao Zedong proposed to enhance the unity of the party. The meeting of the Political Bureau agreed unanimously to Mao's proposal and decided to make Liu Shaoqi draft a resolution to enhance party's unity. Upon the proposal of Mao Zedong, the fourth plenary session of the 7th CPC Central Committee was convened in Beijing in February 1954. Liu Shaoqi chaired the session and delivered a work report representing the Political Bureau. The resolution on strengthening the party's unity adopted by the session criticized the non-organizational activities, but didn't name Gao and Rao, and emphasized the extreme importance of strengthening and maintaining the party's unity among the whole party, especially members of the Central Committee and senior officials. At the National CPC Representatives Conference held in March 1955, Deng Xiaoping, representing the CPC Central Committee, delivered a report on the anti-party alliance of Gao Gong and Rao Shushi. The report summarized the experience and lessons in the fight against the anti-party division activities by Gao and Rao. Footnote: the resolution on certain questions in the history of our party, since the founding of the PRC, adopted by the 6th plenary session of the 11th CPC Central Committee in June 1981, no longer called it an anti-party alliance by Gao Gang and Rao Shushi. End of footnote. The struggle against the anti-party division activities by Gao and Rao was an important inter-party struggle to maintain and strengthen the unity of the party after it assumed the reins of government. With the principle of learning from past errors to avoid future ones and curing the sickness to save the patient, the struggle focused on drawing lessons and deeply educating all party members, especially senior officials. After the splitists were cleared out, the party's unity was not damaged, but further enhanced. The unity formed by the CPC Central Committee since the Yan'an Rectification Movement and the 7th CPC National Congress was consolidated, and the whole party reached a high consensus based on Marxism-Leninism to be united in fulfilling the great historical mission in the socialist revolution. During this period, the party also examined personal histories of party officials. After the founding of the PRC, party organizations at all levels recruited a large number of new members owing to the need of the work. As the number of party officials expanded, the conditions of party officials' personal histories became more complicated. However, because of the frequent job transfers of officials, party organizations of various levels had not enough time to examine personal histories of all the officials, particularly those new ones. In selection of cadres, some leading officials focused only on working capability, but neglected the examination of political records. As a result, among new party officials there were some with unclear histories and a few counter-revolutionaries. Even among veteran cadres there were some whose personal histories were not examined or were unclear after examination. Therefore, the CPC Central Committee thought it necessary to conduct a thorough examination of personal histories of all party officials within 2 or 3 years in order to better build the country. On November 24, 1953, the CPC Central Committee made the decision to examine personal histories of officials. Through examination, the party got to the real conditions of personal histories of almost all the officials across the country. With clear conclusions on their personal histories, most of the party's officials cast off the burden on their mind and were able to feel free to work. While examining officials' personal histories, the party was also preparing for its first National Congress after the founding of the PRC, the 8th CPC National Congress, to be held in 1956. 11 years had passed since the 7th CPC National Congress in 1945. During this period, the conditions of the CPC had also changed significantly with the victory of revolution as well as the political, economic, and cultural development of the country. At the end of June 1956, the party had a total membership of 10.734 million, 3 times the figure in 1949, and 9 times that when the 7th CPC National Congress was held, which was 1.74% of the country's total population at that time. Of the total party members, 1.502 million, or 14% of the membership, were workers. 7.417 million, or 69.1%, were peasants. 1.255 million, or 11.7%, were intellectuals. 558,000, or 5.2%, were of other social statuses. Women constituted about 10% of the total membership, and people from ethnic minorities accounted for 3.6% of the total membership. Having become the party in power, the CPC was already in a position of core leadership in the country's political system. Across the country, the number of officials at or above county level reached 300,000, and most of the leading officials in the government, economic entities, cultural and education organizations, as well as people's organizations, were members of the CPC. Such changes brought new trials to the party. The 8th CPC National Congress was held in Beijing from September 15th to the 27th, 1956. In his opening address, Mao Zedong said, "Close integration of Marxist-Leninist theory with the practice of the Chinese Revolution is the ideological principle consistently followed by our party. Among many of our comrades, there still are standpoints and styles of work which are contrary to Marxism-Leninism, namely, subjectivism in their way of thinking, bureaucracy in their way of work, and sectarianism in organizational questions. Such standpoints and such styles of work alienate us from the masses, cut us off from reality, and harm unity both within and outside the party. They obstruct the advance of our cause and the progress of our comrades. Such serious shortcomings in our ranks must be vigorously corrected by strengthening ideological education in the party." This put forward new requirements on how to strengthen the building of a ruling party under new historical conditions. There were 32 instances of applause during the process of this speech of less than 3,000 Chinese characters, and the atmosphere of the opening ceremony was very lively. Strengthening the building of a party in power was also discussed by Liu Shaoqi and Deng Xiaoping in their reports to the Congress. In his report, Liu Shaoqi said, "Whether the rank-and-file party members, and primarily the high-ranking cadres, can, in the various periods, apply the Marxist-Leninist stand, viewpoint, and method to sum up experience in the struggle, hold fast to the truth, and correct mistakes. This is the primary criterion by which the level of Marxist-Leninist understanding of party cadres is judged." In his report on the revision of the party constitution, Deng Xiaoping, combining the new circumstances in governing the country, stated in a systemic way that the mass line must be the party's basic line. He said, "If correct application of the mass line has brought success, any departure from it will certainly damage our work and the people's interests. The present position of our party as the party in power throughout the country has greatly increased the danger of our becoming divorced from the masses and the damage this could do to the masses is also greater than before. Therefore, it is of special significance at present to diligently propagate and carry out the mass line throughout the party. To further improve and strengthen the party's leadership, the 8th CPC National Congress put forward provisions on the systems of the party and the country. The Congress decided that party members would enjoy the right of giving full play to their creative ability and work. Party members had the right to reserve their opinions and submit them to a leading body of the party in case they disagreed with any party decision, which, in the meantime, they must carry out unconditionally. Should a lower party organization find that a decision made by a higher party organization did not suit the actual conditions in its locality or in its particular department, it should request the higher party organization concerned to modify the decision. The Congress emphasized strengthening the supervision work of the party and the country to timely discover and correct bureaucracy in various forms and punish those who violated state laws and party discipline. The supervision commissions should not confine themselves to dealing with individual cases as they arise, but should work actively to find out how the party constitution, party discipline, communist ethics, and state laws and decrees are being observed by party members. The Congress said that one of the basic requirements of democratic centralism in the party was that party congresses at the various levels be held at regular intervals and play their part to the full. Party congresses above county levels were to have a fixed term and were to be called into session once a year, making the congresses the party's highest policy-making and supervisory organs. The party constitution amended by this Congress said the CPC Central Committee, if it thinks necessary, can decide to establish an honorary chairman of the committee. That was because, in the summer of the year, Mao Zedong proposed to the Central Committee that he was to quit the post as chairman of the party at a proper time, and then act as an honorary chairman. He also put forward not acting as next chairman of the country, and proposed to amend the Constitution so that chairman and vice chairman of the country shall serve no more than 2 consecutive terms. Mao had also expressed his views on not serving as next chairman of the country and tried to persuade those who did not agree. This was an important motion to abolish lifelong tenure for leading officials and reform the leadership regime of the party and the country. The party constitution amended by this Congress didn't list Mao Zedong thought as the party's guide. This was also decided upon Mao's proposals. In a circular issued in December 1954, the publicity department of the CPC Central Committee said Comrade Mao Zedong had instructed it not to use the term Mao Zedong thought anymore to avoid any major misunderstanding, so party officials should follow Mao's directive. When examining the circular, Mao also proposed to replace Mao Zedong thought with works of Comrade Mao Zedong if he was mentioned in articles and speeches. He once said there might be misunderstanding that Mao Zedong thought and Marxism-Leninism were different if they were listed equally. Although the party constitution amended at the 8th CPC National Congress didn't list Mao Zedong thought as the party's guiding thoughts, Mao Zedong was still the leader of the whole party, and his prestige in the party and among all the people of the country was increased, and the unity of the party was strengthened more than ever before. Although party building later diverged from the principles established in the 8th CPC National Congress due to some mistakes in the guiding thoughts, many good thoughts were not carried through or implemented. However, this party Congress still advanced a great step in the exploration of building a party in power. Today, when great achievements have been made in the reform and opening up as well the modernization drive, these thoughts were not outdated, but increasingly precious instead. Grave influences of left mistakes. Early at the preparatory meeting to the 8th CPC National Congress, Mao Zedong had put forward to carry forward the fine traditions of the party to fight against subjectivism, sectarianism, as well as bureaucracy. At the second plenary session of the 8th CPC Central Committee, he said, "We are to carry out a rectification movement next year. 3 bad styles are to be rectified. 1. Subjectivism, 2. Sectarianism, and 3. Bureaucracy. In our history, rectification has proved to be an effective method. From now on, all problems among the people or inside the party are to be solved by means of rectification, by means of criticism and self-criticism, and not by force." The CPC Central Committee issued on April 27, 1957, a directive on the rectification movement. On April 30th, Mao Zedong chaired the 12th enlarged meeting of the Supreme Council of State. Party and state leaders, responsible persons of non-communist parties and personages without party affiliation attended the meeting. Mao said that it was time for rectification, and the air of criticism should be continued. The main purpose of rectification was to address contradictions within the ranks of the people and oppose subjectivism, sectarianism, and bureaucracy. He hoped the party's style of work could be improved through criticism from all works of life, and the contradictions in daily work between the party and democratic parties, as well as intellectuals, could be properly solved through further improving various leadership regimes of the party. After his directives on the rectification movement were published in the People's Daily on May 1st, party organizations at all levels immediately started rectification throughout the party. As the rectification movement advanced, between early May and the first 10 days of June, besides criticism on behaviors of subjectivism, sectarianism, and bureaucracy and their harms, a few rightists also aired some improper opinions involving the party's leadership position, as well as judgments on major issues such as the system of socialism, the party's principles and policies, and all previous political movements after the founding of the PRC. This showed that the rightist thinking was emerging and spreading, taking the opportunity of the rectification movement, and drawing attention from the CPC Central Committee and Mao Zedong. Against such a backdrop, on May 15th, Mao wrote an article titled, "Things Are Beginning to Change." In this article, he changed his views on the situation raised, for the first time, the spate of wild attacks by the rightists. The rightists, who are anti-communist, are making a desperate attempt to stir up a typhoon above force 7 in China, strong enough to devastate crops and houses, he said. This article indicated that the guiding thought of the CPC Central Committee and Mao Zedong was changing from properly addressing contradictions within the ranks of the people to combating the enemy, and the focus was changed from rectifying the party to attacking the rightists. This interrupted the CPC's exploration of self-building and reversed the good beginning of the party's exploration of a road to build socialism conforming to Chinese conditions. An even worse result was that the following third plenary session of the 8th CPC Central Committee and the second session of the 8th CPC National Congress revised the judgment on the major contradictions in China made by the 8th CPC National Congress. Such revision directly led to the changes of the party's guiding thoughts, theoretical basis, and working style, which caused serious consequences. Since then, the leftist thinking seriously affected the building of a party in power, which was a bitter lesson in the party's history after the founding of the PRC. The rectification movement and anti-rightists' struggle ended in the summer of 1958. One of the serious consequences of the anti-rightist struggle was the launch of the Great Leap Forward movement in 1958. To address serious difficulties, the party had to make adjustments and held an enlarged work conference of the CPC Central Committee in 1962. Domestic conditions took a favorable turn after the meeting. However, as domestic policies were further adjusted and the Sino-Soviet debate intensified, Chiang Kai-shek in Taiwan decided to take this opportunity to reconquer the mainland. All this changed Mao's views on domestic and international conditions and his theory of class struggle. The 10th plenary session of the 8th CPC Central Committee, held on September 24th to the 27th, 1962, was an important turning point. During this session, Mao stressed class struggle again, delivering several speeches on class, current conditions, and contradictions. He said class struggle undoubtedly existed in socialist countries and would inevitably be reflected within the party and then become the source of revisionism in the party. He then reminded the entire party of not forgetting class struggle, which must be always emphasized. The mention of class struggle again at the 10th plenary session of the 8th CPC Central Committee severely affected China's political development. Because the party's political line turned left, party building was negatively affected. After the session, based on the judgment that the domestic class struggle had become increasingly grim, the CPC Central Committee decided to wage a socialist education movement throughout the country. At the work conference of the CPC Central Committee held in Beijing from February 21st to the 28th, 1963, Mao Zedong said that only by stressing socialist education could the party prevent revisionism, and he urged local party committees to accelerate socialist education. The CPC Central Committee formulated 2 documents in May and September of the year, respectively, on carrying out socialist education in the rural areas. The socialist education movement was spread throughout the country based on the experiments in some regions. The 2 documents proposed combining the socialist education movement with party consolidation, and the second document even clearly stated that this socialist education movement was in fact a mass party consolidation movement. The 3-year socialist education movement had corrected the bad conduct of party officials, solved problems in the management of collective economic organizations, cracked down on embezzlement and theft, and put a stop to feudal and superstitious activities. However, since this movement was carried out on the guidance of leftist thinking, the party consolidation had also deviated from the original purpose, affected by the leftist mistakes, with a large number of party members and officials being hurt erroneously. They were unjustly, falsely, or wrongly charged, having a very bad influence, and later arousing even more cases of erroneously charging officials during the Cultural Revolution, 1966 to 1976. An enlarged meeting of the Political Bureau of the CPC Central Committee was held in Beijing from May 4th to May 26th, 1966. The circular adopted on May 16th required the whole party to hold high the great banner of the proletarian cultural revolution, thoroughly expose the reactionary bourgeois stand of those so-called academic authorities who oppose the party and socialism, thoroughly criticize and repudiate the reactionary bourgeois ideas in the sphere of academia, education, journalism, literature and art, and publishing, and seize the leadership in these cultural spheres. To achieve this, it is necessary at the same time to criticize and repudiate those representatives of the bourgeoisie who have sneaked into the party, the government, the army, and all spheres of culture, to clear them out, or transfer some of them to other positions. Above all, we must not entrust these people with the work of leading the cultural revolution. This circular, with serious erroneous judgments, was the major foundation for Mao Zedong to initiate the Cultural Revolution. The enlarged meeting of the Political Bureau of the CPC Central Committee in May 1966 marked the official beginning of the Cultural Revolution, and the circular adopted at the meeting served as a guideline to initiate the Cultural Revolution. The Cultural Revolution brought serious harm to party building. It was called the most extensive and deepest party consolidation movement in the history of the CPC, but actually, organizational development of the party was gravely damaged. During the Cultural Revolution, Mao proposed a new program of party building. The party must be a vigorous vanguard organization, consisting of those advanced ones in the proletariat who are able to lead proletarian and revolutionary people for the struggle against class enemies. Hoping to consolidate party organizations, he said at the first plenary session of the 9th CPC Central Committee, "We raise this slogan too, but we call it rectification and party building. In fact, the party needs to be rebuilt." But in a leftist atmosphere at that time, party consolidation in various places of the country was influenced by leftist thinking. During the process of rectification and party building, most of the leading officials, and even quite a few of the low-level officials and ordinary people, were persecuted under the excuse of purifying party organizations. Among all the country's officials, 17.7% were subject to investigation. Under the guidance of Kang Sheng, the then vice chairman of the CPC Central Committee, and Jiang Qing, the then member of the Political Bureau of the CPC Central Committee, the party rectification specially emphasized getting rid of the stale and taking in the fresh, expelling those so-called traitors, secret agents, and die-hard capitalist roaders out of the party, but admitting heads of rebel factions into the party. Many honest and upright officials were removed from posts, and speculators and factionalists wormed their way into the party. Organizations of the party were hence impure. The guiding thought during this time of party rectification was the new party-building principle proposed by Mao Zedong, getting rid of the stale and taking in the fresh. Since the principle was wrong, rectification and party building on this basis would only play a negative role. During the Cultural Revolution, in an atmosphere of erroneous extension of class struggle, lies, empty talk, and cliches became a common practice, and various evil trends, such as formalism, anarchism, liberalism, extreme individualism, and playing politics were spreading. The Cultural Revolution hadn't brought any positive influence to party building. Instead, it disarrayed the party's guiding thoughts, seriously damaged the democratic centralism, the party's style of work and discipline, and undermined the party's prestige and cohesion. There is no party that has never made mistakes. What is important is whether it can draw lessons from the mistakes. Deng Xiaoping said, "Our successes have provided us with valuable experience, and so have our mistakes. Although we thoroughly condemn the Cultural Revolution, we recognize that it was useful to the extent that it taught us a lesson. Without that lesson, we would have been unable to formulate the policies and the ideological, political, and organizational lines that we have worked out since the third plenary session of the 11th CPC Central Committee. Also, without the Cultural Revolution, the party would have been unable to thoroughly correct the extremely negative impact of leftist thinking on party building, and then launch the great project of party building in the new historical period. All these prove that as long as we can properly summarize all the mistakes in the process of party building, the mistakes will also become a valuable fortune to advance the progress of the party. The CPC is able to achieve today's success, not because it never makes mistakes, but because it can learn from the mistakes, better understand objective laws from the lessons, and then correct the mistakes, turning mistakes into precursors of correctness." End of Chapter 2.